really know how to put it any better than to just say there is a culture of lawlessness that has gripped this country. And we're seeing the symptoms everywhere. In the last 2 years in this country, 2021 and 2022, we had over 20,000 homicides. We haven't seen those numbers since the mid-1990s, which I was like 12 or 13 at the time. But we haven't seen those numbers in a very long time. And you would think that when you're seeing things like this, when you're seeing the complete erosion of the rule of law in our urban communities, we are seeing businesses shutter their doors. We're just seeing tax bases destroyed. It's created food deserts because these stores are closing, financial deserts. Banks won't even move into these neighborhoods. We're seeing the homicide rate for Black Americans at 12 times the rate of anyone else. So you would think there would be this swell of support of, we need to crack down, we need law and order. And it's exactly the opposite. We're not learning any lessons. In Illinois right now, they just passed legislation to make their revolving door even worse, to let people back out on crimes even quicker. This is at a time when the homicide rate in Illinois is up 48% in the last 10 years. This is at a time when on the west side of Chicago, the murder rate is so high, it rivals the most violent city in the world, Tijuana, Mexico. You are just as likely to be murdered on the west side of Chicago as Tijuana. That is happening in America right now. And there is no, you see those on the left and you see these woke revolving door policies continuing to be pushed. When we see this utter chaos and destruction, they're doing the same thing in Washington, D.C. Crime is through the roof there, and they're attempting to pass even more, less stringent laws on people. I mean, it defies all logic. It's essentially, hey, our house is on fire, so let's throw gasoline on it. And we're not just seeing it with victims in our communities. We're seeing that violence escalate on law enforcement as well, because when there's no consequences for people's actions, they're going to continue to do things. So we saw 331 police officers shot in 2022. 64 of those officers paid with their lives. In addition, we had nearly 90 ambush attacks. This is coming off 2021, which was the deadliest year for law enforcement in intentional homicides in over 20 years. These are facts, folks. This is not, obviously I get emotional and I get upset when I talk about these things because these are fathers, sons, mothers, and daughters. But it is not up for debate any longer that there is a war on cops in this country. You'll see academics and some politicians who sit their asses safely behind a desk, by the way, saying that there's no real violence against law enforcement. It's not so bad. Well, I'll tell you, we have the statistical data to back it up. But let me just give you the anecdotal data. I still ride the streets on night shift patrol in the inner city of Houston. Every single one of these officers that are going out there right now, we're going out with targets on our backs. That's how we feel. And it's backed up by the statistics I just laid out. And this war on cops, it's not just because of the revolving door criminal justice policies, which certainly plays a role, because when criminals know that they're not going to be thrown in jail for 20 years for shooting at a police officer, they're more inclined to do it the next time. It's also because for the better part of a decade, we've treated police officers like crap in this country. We've had politicians and activists and journalists who it's basically become a grift for them. They know that they can make money if they bash law enforcement. They know if they demonize and denigrate law enforcement, there's a certain segment of the population that's going to support them. But they have a responsibility to support the hardworking men and women of law enforcement when we're out there protecting our communities, when we're doing it the right way. And I don't believe that it's unreasonable to ask any politician or any leader in this country, from the White House on down, to condemn violence against law enforcement. That is an extremely low bar to just make a statement to say we shouldn't be assaulting police officers. And yet they can't even do that. And that's what's really frustrating for law enforcement officers across the country.
Joe, in the case of, you mentioned Washington, D.C., about the city council taking steps to make it even easier or harder for law enforcement to police the streets and easier for criminals to get out. At least the mayor had the good sense to veto that. So, it defies logic in a lot of places on some of the strategies that are in place. But look, the reality of it is this. when you look at crime in cities across this country, there's one thing that they all have in common. And that is that the vast majority of the crime is committed by a very small percentage of people. And when law enforcement can take those people off the streets, when a criminal justice system keeps them off the streets, they don't continue to prey in carnage on communities. Yet, unfortunately, we find ourselves where the ideology of somehow trying to do some type of reform that's going to benefit the community, because there are certain groups of people that maybe do need a second chance, which we agree. You know, it's not necessarily that the criminal justice system is perfect. It's constantly, it's evolving. It's a living approach towards, the actions of communities, the growth of communities.